On today's show, we are giving you a preview of the Grow Together conference and talking with our sponsors about healthy ministry vendors. From insurance to payroll services, it's so important that you find a trusted ministry vendor who understands how ministry operates and gives world-class customer service. That is the focus of today's podcast.
Welcome to the Kingdom One podcast, where we grow the church together. This podcast is here to give you big ideas and help you get practical with the tactical. Here's your host.
Hey, Kingdom One family, welcome back to another podcast. I'm your host. My name is Nick, and building your team's culture is crucial in 2024. In order for you to do that, you have to focus your team away from silos, egos, and turf wars towards collaboration. I want to highlight the 2024 Grow Together Conference, February 8th in Rancho Cucamonga. This conference is here so you can jumpstart your ministry teams to collaborate. If you're listening to this and this is after the February timeframe, you can still grab the conference and recordings. When you purchase your tickets, those also come with the conference recordings. You can register today at growtogether.church. That's growtogether.church. I want to be the first to wish you a happy new year. I know getting back into the swing of things can be difficult, especially after a great holiday season. And no matter where you are in your ministry journey, if you're just starting out this year or if you're a ministry veteran, this podcast is for you. We are here to help you understand what it takes to run the business administration side of your ministry. We focus on HR, finance, marketing, communications, and strategy to help you grow the church together. That's one of our founding principles, is that relationship really does matter. And so as we talk about relationship, as we talk about growing the church together, I sat down with Stephen Bush and asked him a few questions on the Grow Together conference. Why is this so important for ministry leaders?
Yeah, Nick, when we designed the Grow Together conference, something that really was a huge value for us was the sense of community. And I don't know about you, but in my time in local church ministry, there were times when I just felt really alone. I didn't really have sort of a peer per se. And also there were times where I had lots of questions. How do I do this or how do I do that when it came to my job? And I didn't necessarily always have the best people to turn to ask those questions to. And so the Grow Together conference is all about community, but it's also about giving you the resources, the tools, the knowledge that you need to be able to do your role effectively. But our hope is that as you leave the conference, you'll also leave with some new friends, some folks that you can pick up the phone, you can call, you can hopefully even have coffee with, and have that ongoing sense of community even beyond the final day of our conference.
What is the benefit of having multiple tracks for the Grow Together conference?
Again, I think many ministries have really sort of a focal person in each discipline within their ministry. So they have a safety person, they have a finance person, they have maybe even an HR person. And so we wanted to design a conference where it wasn't just HR and finance, for example, Nick. We want to have something that really you could all pile into a van or hop onto a plane or carpool down the road together and be able to actually see more participation. Another space too, Nick, that we heard feedback from last year was this desire and appetite for leadership and for people management. Can we just say in the church, we don't necessarily do the best job training people when they go from single, kind of being an individual contributor now to becoming a people manager? Like, how do you do that effectively? And so that was another big piece that we wanted to offer, was just people management and senior leadership tracks to help us grow in our leadership, but also be able to come with a greater amount of our staff or our volunteers to one conference that could be sort of the shared experience together.
It's so good to hear from our Chief Vision Officer, Stephen. And if you want to grab those tickets, you have a limited amount of time between now and conference. To do that, go to growtogether.church, growtogether.church to get those tickets. As we talk about trusted providers and vendors, as ministry leaders, it can be difficult to find those trusted providers and vendors for your ministry needs, for your business needs. And as ministry leaders, we focus on the gospel. We focus on people's lives and the relationships. And from things like insurance to payroll systems, those things are part of ministry, no doubt. But a lot of times, those don't take the focus, and it's not what you're taught in seminary. In every ministry I meet, they want excellence. They want relationship and economic value that aligns with their nonprofit budgets. In today's podcast, we're going to be hopping into some of the relationships that Kingdom One has curated with marketplace vendors who understand ministry, like I said, who are aligned with your nonprofit budget, but who also provide top-notch service. And just a quick word on that. At Kingdom One, we really think about curating these relationships for you, the ministry leader. And so we're not just recommending one, we're recommending multiple ministry vendors. And the reason for that is the more choices you have, the better off you are. And we don't want you just to hear from us about the products and services that our vendors have. We ask them questions that every ministry leader wants answered. Let's hear from Paylocity on payroll and peer recognition.
When I started, 2 decades ago, offloading taxes, offering multiple direct deposits were kind of on the mind of organizations, ministries. But as we pivot and then we're coming into this modern workplace, we're looking more at how do we engage people? How do we build on culture? How do we connect with our folks? Right? It's really what I think has been top of mind.
This is T. Tran, a HCM Senior Account Executive at Paylocity.
Also, how people are accessing data. Right now, we have folks that are going on Instagram, X, right, YouTube to really just gain access to data to get learning. So being able to really help with that modern workforce, being able to make sure that they're getting information instantaneously, just like they're doing on their personal life.
We're starting to look as an organization for Paylocity is what can we develop in our technology that is going to be more employee facing.
Gabby Garza is a sales director in major markets for Paylocity.
So as we start looking things like learning management systems, peer-to-peer recognition, rewards and incentives, things that are embedded in our technology, we want to help our clients, ministries, and organizations by figuring out how they can leverage Paylocity to focus on what employees want and need in the future, instead of just focusing on, okay, what's going to make this task more efficient? That's important too, but also making your people feel welcome and heard within an organization is even more important now than it ever has been in the past. And that's really what a lot of folks from all different sorts of generations are looking for today. Whereas before, you used to maybe talk to some of your family members where they would stay at an organization from right out of school or college and then all the way through retirement, in their later years. Whereas now we're looking at generations today and we're seeing a lot of folks move from different organization, depending on what they feel, right? They're not just showing up for a paycheck anymore. They're showing up because they want to be heard. They want to be appreciated. They want to be valued. They want to grow as individuals, not just as employees. And that's where our technology is heading, is we want to provide organizations with the tools to make their employees feel heard and valued.
I really appreciate Gabby's answer. It shows that Paylocity is thinking about solving a problem with technology, but also keeping it very personal and very human in its interaction. There's a principle in psychology that says the neurons that fire together wire together. It's a part of our brain and our body. And just like the brain-body connection, there is a connection between our staff and leadership in organizations that is almost like an organism. And so creating great moments of shared connectedness, of appreciation, of recognition for the work that is being done is something that I highly, highly recommend, and am so glad that Paylocity is thinking through that. But as ministry leaders, that could be few and far in between with all the work that we have to do. I asked Gabby to further explain how ministry leaders can leverage this part of the Paylocity tool in order to see their staff become healthy.
And you had kind of alluded to this earlier, how sometimes business administrators within different ministries and organizations are often the unsung hero, right? And a lot of folks in the leadership level of an organization are. And what I love about this peer-to-peer recognition tool is it allows not only peers to recognize each other, but we can also recognize leadership. Leadership can recognize different folks within the organization. And it can be something as simple as just thanking them for their help, thanking them for taking care of somebody else that necessarily they didn't have to. And it's visible to everybody within the organization. So other people can see that they're being recognized and thanked and appreciated. And it makes them also want to replicate that same behavior.
We have embedded in our offerings, right, is the learning workspace. And so with what's happening in today's landscape, you have DEIA, right? You have content from a compliance standpoint, both federal, state. But I think when we speak about the ministries, right, the content that Kingdom One provides, right, the above reproach, right, trainings and so forth. In our learning, you can actually upload those contents, deploy it out to your employees, right? And the ministries can actually track them, create quizzes, and be able to really get their folks, right, to understand how important it is to continue to develop people.
T is referring to our above approach trainings for ministry. They're biblically minded and federally compliant to make sure that your ministry is free from sexual harassment and bullying, child abuse, and child neglect. This is really important because as ministry leaders, you need to be able to spot when children are being abused or neglected. And you also need to know the process for reporting that so the child and family can stay safe. These are a suite of trainings that are available at academy.kingdomone.co. You can go there to find out how those trainings can impact your ministry for the better.
And then we also brought in this concept of journaling. And I think journaling is extremely powerful, not just for professional development, but personal development as well. And we're humans, right, Nick? Like we're not perfect by any means. And that also means that we can't possibly remember every single thing that's happened between maybe a 6 or 12 month time span, depending on how often an organization is doing their reviews. So what journaling allows us to do is on the supervisor level, it allows us to look back at what a conversation we may have had with an employee or something an employee has shared. We can do this in a written format or in a video format, and that allows us to get a bigger or a larger scope of understanding and reminders of what may have happened since the last time we had a review to actually give our employees a more meaningful and accurate review and feedback. And then the employees can do the same thing as well. They can go look back at the goals they may have set, journals they may have written in that time period to actually reflect on what went well, what could be done better, and what they want to do moving forward.
As we move from payroll and HRIS systems to insurance, Keith Robinson from Firm Foundation shares with us how his time as a pastor and missionary has built an appreciation for keeping ministries safe from liability.
So my background actually is church ministry. So I spent the past 20 years working at the local church and the parachurch level. I was a missionary, me and my wife, for a number of years. We raised our support, went on the mission field. So we know that world well, and risk management wasn't something that I saw myself getting into early on, but my journey brought me to a ministry several years ago that did staffing and was really involved on the HR side of helping churches to recruit and retain ministry staff. And so that kind of opened a door for me into this whole world of church HR, and then I got into the risk management side.
So good to hear from another ministry leader because, the work that we do is highly relational and it involves a different dynamic than marketplace. So I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
Nick, thank you for that. At Firm Foundation, we understand the unique challenges that churches and ministries face. And so our insurance solutions are crafted to provide a comprehensive coverage and safeguard churches against various risks that oftentimes they don't even know about. So we work really close with ministry leaders, with pastors, with boards to identify potential exposures and then customize insurance plans that not only protect the assets, but really support the overall well-being and the effectiveness of the mission. That's our heart.
Even in marketplace and in ministry, insurance is something that's maybe not well understood. Could you talk to the audience about what are things that ministries should be thinking about when it comes to ministry? What are the products and services that could really benefit a ministry, whether it's a large ministry or a small ministry? What are those products and services that most people are missing out on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a handful of products or services that would be helpful for church leaders to know about. And just to say out loud, most people aren't thinking about insurance until they need it. And so I think that's one of the reasons that Firm Foundation has been such a great ministry partner for so many churches, because we're thinking about these things for you. And here's just a handful of products and services that would be helpful for ministries if they knew about, if they looked into, whether through us or their own broker. But business property insurance. This is huge, and it's really fundamental because it protects churches and ministries against the financial impact to their property. So if you have a property damage or loss, whether it's to the physical structure, to the contents, I mean, let's face it, most houses of worship have really expensive audio and gear these days, and the offices are filled with computers. So, and there's all sorts of exposures that churches have that oftentimes they don't know about. And so this can help protect not only the physical structure, but the contents, the important assets that are there. And it ensures ministries can recover quickly and continue their operations without the burden of hefty repair costs. And we've seen ministries that didn't have this kind of protection be set back. And think about that. If you weren't able to gather for a weekend of worship, how might that impact your ministry? So I think business property insurance is one that for sure is worth looking into if it's not already on lock at this point. Another one is just general liability. That's the broadest coverage for protection in churches and ministries that they need. It's really the backbone of protection for any ministry. It shields against third-party claims for bodily injury, for property damage, for personal injury. So this is important. And oftentimes we think, well, we're doing ministry, we're doing God's work, nobody's going to sue. The truth is, when you have events on your property, when you bring the community in, anything and everything can happen, and we have literally seen it all, Nick. And I, want to encourage churches to think about these things. This will provide a fundamental layer of protection that every ministry should have in place. That's general liability. A couple of other ones, though, that are really important, and I think that churches in particular have unique exposures around these next two. And one is EPLI, or Employment Practices Liability Insurance. Now that's a mouthful, but essentially what EPLI does, it protects the ministries against claims related to their employment practices. So this can include anything from discrimination, harassment, a wrongful termination, any employment-related issue. And it provides not only financial protection, but also helps you maintain a healthy work environment. And it will actually safeguard the reputation of the ministry, God forbid, but if anything happened related to employment practices. So this is a really crucial one. And then maybe one other that would be worth mentioning here that kind of falls under professional liability, but is specific to the leaders of the organization, and that's directors and officers insurance. It's designed to protect the personal assets of leaders in case they face legal action related to decisions while managing the ministry. And this can absolutely happen. People can go after individuals on the board. The directors and the officers of the organization need an added layer of protection because it's a safeguard for them, ensuring they can serve without the fear of personal liability should someone decide to bring a claim. So I think in some ways this is often overlooked, but it kind of falls under that professional liability, which also goes into errors and omissions, which I'll just comment on briefly. Errors and omissions can protect staff and ministries against professional negligence. We think of errors and omissions. This is the kind of insurance that doctors have, right? This is the kind of insurance that counselors have, people that are providing a professional service. And ministries don't often see themselves that way, but legally we are seen that way. So in the context of church and ministries, this coverage, E&O, or errors and omissions, protects against the risks associated with professional services like counseling and other things that you're doing. When you're providing that level of guidance in people's lives, it's important to have some professional liability to just make sure that you're covered.
Keith, it really sounds like you and your team have thought through all the risks and liability that ministries could face. And so thank you for that list. I'm sure there's more things that you could point ministry leaders to. But a question for you when it comes to being insured and having a product that's going to meet your needs. Was there ever a time that you saw a ministry not being properly insured? And what was the outcome of that?
Yeah, one in particular that comes to mind, and this actually goes back to my days of being on staff at a church. We had an event on our parking lot, and we built this massive slip and slide for all the kids in the community to come and have fun, right? So we're out there, we're having a blast. We have over 100 teenagers at our event. And one young man who happened to be a guest of one of our students, one of our regular attending students, goes down the slip and slide. When he gets to the bottom, by the way, he's a 7th grade boy. He weighs about 95 pounds, soaking wet. When he gets to the bottom of the slip and slide, there's a massive collision with some older high school boys. And he ended up breaking his arm, a compound fracture, just below the shoulder. It was nasty. But what was even more challenging in the days that followed, obviously it was a harrowing event for that young man, and ambulance came, and all of this happened. But the liability came back to the church, and they were not properly insured, and it was a mess, to say the least. The family was not happy because again they had no loyalty to the church; they were just guests. And with the proper protection, the church could have avoided a lot of heartache. They would have been able to be in a better position to actually not be on the defensive with that family. But it really put them in a really challenging position that could have been avoided for what amounted to maybe a couple $1,000s a year to avoid something like that. And it ended up costing them far more in the long run. And so that's one example. A recent example was a fire. There was a church that had to take on the financial burden of rebuilding and replacing damaged items because they were not properly insured. And most people think, I just am. I'm properly insured. Someone's looking out for me. But unless you know that person's looking out for you, and that being your broker, your carrier, then I would encourage you to take a fresh look, to invite scrutiny on the policy from someone who knows what to look for, because it can really help you in one of these events. And again, none of us want them to happen, and we typically don't think about it until it does, but then it's too late if we're not properly covered in those instances.
What is the best way somebody can get in touch with you to go through an assessment to see if they're fully covered?
Yeah, the best way is just to shoot me an email. You can email me at keith@firmfoundationins.com. That's Keith at firmfoundationins.com. You can also you can call us anytime. The number is 949-761-0713, 949-761-0713. I'll pick up the phone. I'd love to chat with you about what's happening in your ministry and how we might be able to serve you. You can shoot me an email and let me know that you're interested, and I'll send you an invite, and we can get on the phone or a Zoom call, and we can talk through what areas that we might be able to serve you and help you in.
I sit down with John Hughes from Ronald Blue CPAs to talk about financial stewardship and why this is important and how it can impact your ministry.
I think what people fail to often see is that every decision has a financial implication to it. And I think taking the time to understand how their decisions and really what's happening on the day-to-day basis of ministry can play into the finances of the church. The financial health of a church is downstream of the spiritual health. And so I think the key is stewarding the church well from a biblical perspective is key. And first and foremost, I think the churches that we saw stay, especially through the pandemic, stay really kind of faithful to Scripture and to what the church is called to do, did well, and they in some cases flourished. And so I would highly encourage pastors and church leaders to stay focused on what Paul wrote to the church and make that priority, because the financial benefit, the donations and the giving will follow. And then I think being mindful of stewarding those well for the kingdom, realizing that they are kingdom resources. And then I think as church staff, they're held to a higher standard, and they're kingdom dollars, and the Lord's going to look at them and how they stewarded those things, as the dollars as well as the people, for the furtherance of the ministry. So I think just not being aware of it and not wanting to be transparent with it can be problematic. Churches that are openly transparent to the congregation, to the staff, they'll actually find that it's a better. It may feel uncomfortable, but it's actually better in the long run because of the accountability that comes with it. And there really shouldn't be anything to hide. And there's a lot of great people in the church that want to help, ask good questions, may ask some hard questions, but then you just want to be equipped to be able to answer those, and you should be able to.
I love how you talk about transparency. And one thing that I'm seeing from last month and continuing into this month is a lot of ministries, churches, nonprofits, and schools are giving their end of year report. Is this something that you suggest ministries do?
That's 'tis the season. I'm working on that a lot for clients right now. I think, yes, at minimum, once a year, here's where giving was, here's where spending was. I think inviting people that are interested into the conversation is definitely wise. I wouldn't just put everything out there for the public, because without the conversation, the context of some of the financial transactions, it could be misleading and problematic. But inviting people in, absolutely. The church I'm a part of, we actually every other month have a business meeting for the church membership, and we go over the finances. It is straight from the system. Do we get the finances, which again, that can be a little awkward, but there's full transparency. So that's a lot. That's, 6 times a year. One time a year may be enough, but I think the frequency of that and a regularity is actually really helpful. And a lot of that goes back to being able to identify who is the flock in the church, who should be receiving that information. That's a little bit of a church challenge question: is who is that? Who should be part of that? Some churches may call them family meetings, they may call them member meetings, things like that. But those can be super helpful. I like that as a layperson, as a member of a church. I like seeing that visibility. A little bit biased because I enjoy that stuff, but I appreciate it. And I don't think there's been a problem in the couple years that we've been doing this. If anything, there's more celebration for God's faithfulness of the church and the stewardship and the encouragement of our pastors to continue doing the great work. And even in some cases, more questions around, should we spend more? Do we need to do more than we're already doing? And so again, that's where I think the open conversation, the transparency can be really beneficial for a church.
I know we're going to be together at the Grow Together conference. I'm so excited to hang out with you. I know one of your topics is 5 reasons to get an audit and 2 not to, or 3 reasons to get an audit and 2 not to. And so based upon that, what would you say to a ministry that is thinking about going into an audit, or maybe to a pastor who had their board spring an audit on them? How do they get over that initial audit shock?
What really comes to mind is not so much of me in doing the audits, it's actually getting audited. I had an item brought to the surface. It related to an employee benefit that was somewhat buried in our employee handbook. And the auditors at the time had, wisely read through the handbook and asked the question, was like, well, shouldn't you be accounting for this benefit differently? To use the technical terms, it needed an accrual. It needed a future valuation. It was a post-employment benefit obligation. And I read through it. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I missed that. It had preceded my time in the role. And because it was related to retirement, I wasn't there yet. And so I didn't even think about it. But it ended up a well-intentioned benefit at the time that, had it stayed in place for the several years into the future, would have been very costly to the ministry. And that became costly. It was very expensive to implement the benefit, to manage it correctly and do the work that we needed to do. But over time, it took us several years, probably 5 to 10 years eventually, for that benefit to phase out and to be managed well. But had that audit not, or the auditors not observed that, again, the ministry could have been saddled for several hundreds, if not more, thousands of dollars of costs well into the future, and could have been very problematic, again, had it not been addressed. But there was more of the cultural implications and managing through how to communicate to staff and deal with the benefit that was challenging. It was not easy, but I'm grateful that it finally that it did come to the surface and got addressed. So that's an easy example. It was painful. It was painful on my side because I had to deal with it. And so as much as I like what I do and get to come alongside ministries and help, do their audits, I always feel a little bit of pain when I bring something like that to their attention. So I will say we don't always find things like that, and that doesn't always happen. And I think a big asterisk, and it's kind of maybe a little bit of the predecessor to the conference session, is that audits aren't designed to find all those problems, and they may not find the problems that everybody wants them to find. So sometimes we come in as auditors objective. We have to ask the questions we ask. They're not necessarily ones we choose to ask, but we can rattle the cages of the ministry a little bit. And I've seen it shake up the culture, and not in a good way. And it's unfortunate because, maybe there's some people in roles they shouldn't be in, or it brings to surface some lack of competency in certain positions because we're starting to challenge challenge the people in those roles and really show what they should be doing. It can be disruptive, very disruptive, but I think it can be helpful if people are ready for it. In a sense, you're airing out your dirty laundry. You bring somebody in to investigate, and are we doing this how we should?
In your years of experience, why is it really important to, get into the auditing process? And what would you say to a ministry leader who might be thinking, we have somebody who's pretty proficient with the spreadsheets. I don't know if we need to go that extra mile. Is there something that ministry leader might be missing?
Yeah, I think that, what comes to mind as we get into this topic is churches are so, and ministries as well, have such a great passion and heart for the ministry and bringing people in with that same passion, that oftentimes the technical skills may not always come along with that. I think it's just helpful for a church just to have somebody in the waiting or in the back pocket to be able to help with some of those challenges or some of those technical things that they may not be overly skilled in. Generally you want to have you'll have a lot of generalists in roles, whether it be HR or accounting or finance, but to have specific technicians and places in those areas can really help. Not just it's not just missing things, but doing things right. And so I think on the tax treatment side, like we were chatting about earlier, just knowing when a gift to a staff member is a taxable benefit, not to pay payroll taxes correctly, dealing with ministerial housing. That's the number one question I get from churches is usually around ministerial housing, and it's complicated. It's hard. It's hard for CPAs to do it. And so I would never expect a church to master that and do it well. So, the quote that I always like putting out there is, if you think it's expensive to hire a professional, wait till you hire an amateur. There's just a lot of things that you may not know that that it's helpful to have somebody who does, and it's going to be worth a few $1,000s a year, maybe a little bit more, just to have somebody to ask the questions to, or maybe do a review of whatever technical area it could be. And that can, again, anything from operations to accounting to HR. I mean, that's what you do. That's what Kingdom One does. That's what we do. We want to come alongside and help the church thrive and succeed. And there's just a lot of things that can be easily missed. And how can we help set it up for the future or going forward so that ministry can be first and foremost and be done smoothly and easily?
John, thank you so much for adding value to this podcast. Could you just give our audience a bit of insight of why Ronald Blue and how it helps ministries, churches, schools, and nonprofits get closer to their mission?
Yeah, our tagline is accounting for the mission. And that's a huge focus for us, is coming alongside missionally minded people, that's for profit or not for profit, and really helping whatever it is that they do it to the best and really for the kingdom. One of our passions, especially in our not-for-profit practice, is coming alongside churches and ministries. And whether it's an audit, review, compilation, accounting services, consulting, just providing them the service that they need with like-minded, Christ-centered, business-focused individuals. We have that same worldview. We have that same perspective and really the same end in mind. And we want to help churches and ministries get to where they need to go, with whatever services they need. So I love being able to come alongside church and just helping them and just, again, solving the problems. If it's an audit, great. One of our favorite things is to see a church, especially a church, no longer need audits, because that usually means they've paid off their debt for a building or construction. So we celebrate the fact when we don't have to do an audit of a church, because that means more dollars get to go back in the kingdom, or we get to redirect those dollars, and let's do a consulting agreement. Let's look at internal controls. Let's make sure stewardship is well. Let's maybe look at rewriting some bylaws. But how can we come alongside and really, again, serve the church where they need it from a financial and an accounting perspective? That's what God's gifted us in. That's what we're passionate about, and the numbers. And again, how do we equip the church, equip the people that are doing this day in and day out to do their job well? And eventually, if we can fall back and go serve another client, great, because that means you've either hired somebody in-house, which is the best case scenario, or you don't need our services anymore because you've been equipped and we get to go help somebody else. So in a way, we like working ourselves out of a job, but anything in that kind of accounting and finance space, we want to be a resource to churches and ministries for.
Kingdom One family, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. The Grow Together Conference is here to help you and your team get a jump start on your 2024 goals. With 9 different tracks across legal, HR, finance, safety, marketing, communications, people management, and senior leadership, we are dedicated to seeing you and your team grow. Not only is this a great way for you to align on your 2024 goals, but it's also a great way for you to network with other ministry leaders in your area. When it comes to longevity, community is key. And if you want to stay in your role and make an impact for the kingdom, the best thing you can do is to find ministry friends that you can call and that you can rest assured that they know what you're going through and that you can share ideas together. If that sounds like something you want to do, go to growtogether.church to get your tickets today. That's growtogether.church. There's something that's come across your desktop and it's just keeping you awake at night. If there's a project that you're working on and it feels like it's going in reverse, you can get help from Kingdom One. We would love to partner with you in setting a plan, setting up a time to meet with one of our team members and executing on that plan to make sure that your ministry becomes courageous, healthy, and effective in all areas. You can go to kingdomone.co/get-started today to set up a call with one of our team members. Again, that's kingdomone.co/get-started today. If you have any questions for us about this podcast or anything in general, our email is hello@kingdomone.co. And until we chat again, let's grow the church together.